Guten Tag, bonjour, buongiorno, and welcome to the update on the continental European markets. My name is Eva Seller, and I thank you for coming on a little journey with me throughout our region to talk about the market's performance at the moment, a bit of background information on that, as well as some of the challenges and opportunities, as well as detail on what lies ahead for us. When we talk about continental Europe, we predominantly refer to the markets of Germany, France, and Italy, who in their combined strength deliver 421,300 visitors to Australia per year. That represents a spend of 2.5 billion Australian dollars, which is a figure that has grown by 5% compared to the year before. And taking out one of the segments that currently struggles within our market's performance, the working holiday segment, we even look at a growth of 7% in total visitor spend. When talking about continental Europe's key strengths, we mainly talk about dispersal and length of stay, and obviously the associated average spend per person that comes with that. Looking at Germany more specifically, Germany is a highly densely populated country. There are 82 million Germans that live in the size of a country that you can fit into Australia 22 times. You can imagine that Germans, when they get into Australia, whilst they enjoy the city experiences in their city of arrival and obviously in their city of departure, they really like to get out and about into regional Australia and explore. And that is what Germans do, mainly in a self-drive capacity, either in a camper van or in a car, and hence they represent the fifth most valuable market in total dispersed nights. For the French market is still a reasonably young market, with just under 50% of the market being under 30 years of age. A large chunk of these visitors comes in a working holiday capacity, and that means that be it for the tourism experience or being it for the job that they like to do outside of the major cities, dispersal is also reasonably high, as is their combined length of stay over the total time they spend in Australia. For the Italian market, it really is the average spend per person that stands out for the Italian market. Working holiday makers contribute to some extent to that over the length of stay, but also the non-working holiday visitor from Italy really likes upmarket experiences. Italian visitors would stay in a 4 to 5-star accommodation place, and they like the tourism experiences that are associated with that. The whole braggability aspect of a holiday still plays a reasonably important role in Italy, and that makes for a good spending visitor, which is obviously a visitor we love to have. I would like to spend a little bit of time talking about the importance of the working holiday visitor segment to our region. Working holiday makers, more generically speaking, are important for the following reasons. Europeans suffer from a little bit of a lack of sense of urgency to travel to Australia now. People love and dream about a holiday in Australia, but they don't really tend to make it happen now. If, however, your daughter, your son, your cousin, your best friend, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, etc., are in Australia right now, the likelihood of you making that dream come true and traveling there now to go and visit the person you know is very high. So that is, on the one hand, a very important factor. The other is that they obviously make for very good and positive ambassadors when they come back to our home countries and talk about their experience in Australia. Looking at the sheer facts, however, it's also a segment that we shouldn't neglect nor underestimate, and that we need to make fall in love with Australia again. The total real number of working holiday makers from Germany, France, and Italy combines sits just under 58,000 visitors. That is a sizable chunk. Germany and France make up about 23 to 24,000 respectively of that, and Italy about 10,500 visitors. Unfortunately, the markets of Germany and Italy are in decline at the moment, with Germany sitting at -7 and Italy at -6%, and it is only the French market that is showing good growth with +4% of working holiday visa grants at the moment. If we go into the details of every one of those visitors, it is the average spend that really stands out for a working holiday trip. The global average spend per person sits at $5,100. If you look at an Italian working holiday maker, they spent more than double that at $10,467, and the Germans sit just under $10,000 per person, and the French at under 9,000. If you look at the share that working holiday makers have in the overall visitor mix from our countries, globally it is 1 in 50 visitors that is a working holiday maker. In Germany, every ninth visitor comes there for a working holiday. In France, the number is even higher and more significant, with 1 in 6 visitors out of France coming to Australia for a working holiday, and in Italy it is still 1 in 7 visitors. They stay for a very long time. The global average is 32 nights. An Italian working holiday maker stays for 165 nights, a German for 145, and a French for still 132 nights. So you look at how many times you can fit the average visitor into that. And looking at visits of regional Australia, so the dispersed nights, in France, over 61% of our working holiday makers spend the majority of those nights outside of the capital cities. In Germany, the share of dispersed nights sits at 52%, and in Italy it is the same number, when globally only 23% of nights are spent in regional Australia. A few figures on the German market more specifically. Currently, 207,300 Germans come to Australia every year, and the large majority of those come for leisure or holiday purposes, with round about 81%. Our visitor arrivals generally are soft at the moment. However, there is good news that our total market spend of 1.2 billion Australian dollars represents an increase of 3% for Germany. The median night stayed, that means not regarding the working holiday or youth market, is 21 nights, which is a good 3-week holiday in Australia. Given that Germans have a generous leave allowance of between 5 to 6 weeks per year, Australia is by all means a reasonable holiday proposition that people have the time to actually go for. What is important to a German consumer when choosing a holiday destination? Safety and security, of course, is, as for most people around the world, very important, and thankfully Australia naturally ranks very highly for that. It is important, though, to note that 63% of Germans look for nature and wildlife experiences. And this is an area where I believe Australia can do so much more in positioning itself, not only in showing what is the unique wildlife that Australia has to offer, but more importantly still, where do I see Australia's wildlife in a natural environment? When do I best go and do that? And how do I go about experiencing it? Friendly and open citizens come next, and this is an area or an aspect of Australia which naturally works extremely well. When Germans return from Australia, they rave about the Australians they have met, about the friendly encounters, but also the genuine nature of Australians and the fact that they felt very, very welcome on the ground in Australia. With all of that, the areas represented by the signature experiences of Australia resonate really well. And within that, in particular, the indigenous tourism experiences, because Germans love to hear the stories of the land from those that were there first. They equally love to hear where you can experience wildlife encounters, and they love the Great Walks of Australia as well as the luxury lodges of Australia. As in our other markets, we target the high-value traveler specifically in our activity in the German market. They love to travel long haul, they have a natural preference for Australia, and what Australia offers in the areas of coastland, aquatic, nature and wildlife, food and wine is what these people naturally look for when deciding on their next holiday destination. We have a sizable pool of high-value travelers from the German market, with 1.2 million high-value travelers that are already considering Australia, but almost more importantly, a size of 3.4 million German high-value travelers that are not currently considering Australia and where we can do our job in inspiring them to do so after all. These people spend 2 to 3 times as much as the average traveler, and they are predominantly free and independent travelers at round about 70% of the total market size. The French market really is the shiny and the shooting star of our region at the moment. Not only are the visitor arrivals increasing, and even by now the market has crossed the 142,000 visitor mark and is aiming for the 150,000 mark, it is also the total market spend that is up by 16% and sits around 815 million Australian dollars at present. The length of stay is comparable to the one from Germany at 21 nights or 3 weeks. And the portion of leisure traffic is still very, very high at 74%. It is the one market that has a big deal with French submarines being built in and around Adelaide, where business travel plays a slightly bigger role than in the other markets, but overall it is a leisure-driven market as well. What drives a French consumer in making their holiday destination choice? Interestingly, nature and wildlife are the number one factor by quite a distance for the French to determine where they will go on holiday. And this is an area where I believe Australia can still do so much more to show what is so unique and how can you go about experiencing this. Interestingly enough, value for money comes next, and that is something that we mustn't underestimate because the French consumer, contrary to the German and Italian one, can actually still change their mind in the holiday destination choice at the last minute if they feel that they get a better value for money deal elsewhere. And that means that as a commercial product in Australia, positioning why your product is good value for money is very, very important. We've talked about safety and security before, and thankfully, again, Australia ranks highly in the overall scheme of things there anyway. And for the French visitor, history and heritage, as well as friendly and open citizens, are very important. And this is where, for the French market, the Aboriginal culture and the Aboriginal tourism experience comes into play as well, where we need to show where people can meet and go on Aboriginal tourism experiences and hear the story of the land from those that are there to share it. Looking at the high value traveler from France, the profile itself is comparable to the other markets we look after and to Germany more specifically as well. The difference sits in the size of the target audience, with 800,000 French being in the pure form of the high-value traveler, and an additional 4 million French high-value travelers coming into the mix who are currently not considering Australia. And that for me is the audience that we really need to work on to convince that Australia is the place to come on their next holiday. They again spend more than the average traveler by 2 to 3 times, and they are equally a very independent and free type of traveler, with just under 65% organizing their trip free and independently. Looking at the Italian market, it sits just under 78,000 visitors, a market that currently is rather soft in its performance, but that ranks highly in the overall market mix for the sheer spend that comes with every one of those visitors. It is a leisure-focused market as well, a market that stays slightly longer than France and Germany, with 23 nights median per Italian visitor. It is very interesting to look at what makes an Italian consumer determine where to go on their holiday next. The one area that is the common denominator across continental Europe is nature and wildlife, which in Italy's case again takes number one position and is something where we need to help the Italian traveler understand better what is so unique about Australia and how can they go about experiencing that. And in their case, experiencing it in an upmarket or premium way, because that is how they like to travel. Value and money and safety and security sit in the top 4 as they do in other markets, but interestingly enough, history and heritage as well as coastal and aquatic are also up there in the key decision-making factors and rank more highly than friendly and open citizens for the Italian market. Aquatic and coastal historically has always played a key role in our marketing to the Italian traveler, when some of the island resorts, the more upmarket accommodation options, but also the coastal resorts and experiences have resonated really well and will continue to play an important role in our marketing. History and heritage is something that can be positioned more clearly so that the Italian visitor knows where to go and how to do it when they want to experience this area. The Italian high-value traveler, whilst in overall principle fitting in with what the global high-value traveler does, interestingly enough, only stays for an average of 9 nights. And that begs the question whether there is a segment of the Italian long-haul travel market that we haven't catered for by presenting shorter, sharper itinerary options that can appeal to people who are reasonably time poor but have the cash to actually spend on a once in a lifetime or unique holiday experience. The size of the market is 600,000 high value travelers that are already considering Australia and an additional 1.7 million that are not in that consideration set at the moment but fit the overall bill for the high value traveler. We now look at the key challenges and opportunities that continental Europe faces when convincing people to come on a holiday to Australia. First and foremost, our budgets are not huge in this region. We are being outspent by most of our friendly tourism board competitors, especially those of Canada, South Africa, and Japan, when talking to the audiences across our region. We have very limited natural noise in the markets, and let me assure you, the natural noise we occasionally get is not necessarily good, as it is about natural disasters or areas of politics where Europe functions differently. And we continuously operate below media threshold in everything we do. Unfortunately, there is a decline in fashionability in these European markets. There is simply not enough new news or enticing news to make people consider Australia as the trendy place. There is still a high gap between intention to travel versus conversion, and this is something we need to continuously try and close. And Australia has been and will continue to be a complex destination for visitors to get their head around. How will they actually go about planning their trip? And there is a certain lack of urgency to travel now. People leave it until they are retired, until they perceive to have more time, even though, to be honest, all of our continental European markets have the leave allowances to be able to make that trip while they are still in the workforce, and we actually know that they will come back as the repeat rate is very high. We have a decline in youth loving Australia and wanting to come here for their working holiday program, and we need to change that. Overall, we know that we have a great opportunity in the dispersing nature of our travelers, be it youth or be it the rest of the audience, and we know that we can reignite youth and the working holiday maker to love us again. The repeat rate, the very high rate of just under 50%, is a blessing and a threat at the same time. It is a threat because we know that a second or third time visitor will spend less by about 25% compared to a first time visitor. At the same time, it is the great opportunity to get these people to tell our story, to make it real, to tell other visitors how they went about organizing their trip, what there is to see and what they loved. So to harness that advocacy is a great opportunity. We have a very strong and relevant set of airlines being present and active in this market, and we have a great tour operator landscape that both of those areas of operation form great partnerships with us. We have an engaged distribution network of Aussie specialist and premier Aussie specialist agents that are active, and we have the great fortune to have dedicated Aussie specialist trainers in all three markets who work with those people to increase their sales knowledge all the time. There will be a focus on launching a new brand platform or brand approach, and that is something that I believe will resonate very strongly in our markets. We need to be a bit braver though. We need to share more new news about the destination, but we also need to be a bit braver and be brutally simple by actually being a bit more selective in what we tell people. We have for years told people that basically Australia is a destination where you can travel all throughout the year and you can do pretty much everything that could be a passion point for someone. And by telling this story, which effectively is true, we've made it probably more complex than Australia needs to be. So let's try and focus on, rather than telling people you can do it all the time, what can you do and where, and how can you make it easy? Try some new itineraries or be more selective in focusing on one experience rather than all, and mix them throughout the course of the year. We need to help people have that Australian experience and know how to go about it. The Australian personality, I think, has been underplayed in recent years, and that is something that we definitely need to dial up. as a summary of all of that, I'd love to urge us, but also all of you, in just thinking in everything that you do and position, it needs to be so uniquely Australian, it needs to be so special that somebody wants to get on a plane for approximately 20 hours to have this holiday experience when there are other places in the world that equally have great things to offer. So how is Australia unique, and how can we make it easy for people to come and travel so that they think it is the place that needs to be my next holiday destination? Europe's aviation landscape and capacity is solid and sound, and definitely not an area of issue. There is a sufficient number of flights from the major hubs, but also from regional airports, and they go via the Middle East or Southeast Asia. Both routes by now are equally as popular, and the price points for flights to Australia, to be honest, have never been better or cheaper. Who do we actually work with to tell the story of Australia and make it real for the European customer? We work with key distribution partners and specialist operators across all three markets. Very important ambassadors for us are our premier Aussie specialists as well as the Aussie specialist agents. And if you look at the total numbers, over 3,000 Aussie specialists are currently qualified in Germany, France, Italy, Austria, and Switzerland. And out of those, there are 236 Premier Aussie specialists in Germany, France, and Italy. These are people who have been to Australia personally, who do some specialist marketing in Australia, and who generally liaise and network with us on a much more closely basis. And they are the ones that are listed on Australia.com as points of reference for our end consumer. We do obviously work with our airline partners and online travel agencies as well. In which shape or form do we work with our partners? We have on Australia.com, we have a content and offer hub platform where at the moment German influencers or bloggers are telling their story about Australia in a very specific and bespoke way, like my holiday on Fraser Island as one example. And we match tour operator offers with that to entice customers to actually make that their holiday as well. This is something that performs extremely well in terms of the dwell time on site and the actual referral going off to our partners as well as back to the bloggers themselves. We will introduce that same system in France and Italy in the remaining financial year. We are in the very fortunate position to have dedicated Aussie specialist trainers in all three markets, and they are continuously on the road or on the webinar to train the travel trade and to recruit new Aussie specialists and qualify those that we have. Our media and PR program with visiting journalists and influencers, as well as media relations and story pitching, is an extremely vital part of what we do in the region. And this is where we work with industry in Australia to feature in the travel itineraries for our journalists and influencers. Trade events play a key role, with ITB being the leading trade event on the ground in Germany, taking place in March every year. Then the MegaFam Corroboree West that comes up in October this year, with the workshop component being held in Perth, and a contingent of round about 50 agents from German-speaking Europe and 15 each from France and from Italy in the overall mix of 300 agents. And then as a first, there is the UK-Europe Marketplace, which will take place in London in late October this year, which is a replacement of our activity at World Travel Market and the European Product Workshop. What's there for the remainder of the financial year from our markets? First and foremost, we really look forward to welcoming a large contingent of European buyers to ATE. With 48 buyer companies, this is actually larger than the contingent we had last year. And a few call-outs in amongst this group. There are two specialist interest operators with Kel 12 from the Italian market, that is the National Geographic Expeditions partner in the Italian market, as well as Fineway as a premium buyer from the German market. And the other company I'd like to call out is Tourlane, a German tour operator active in other European markets as well, that is the shooting star or the rising star in the markets. There is a big youth campaign called Australia Inc. that will be launched, or has actually been launched, in Germany and France as part of three markets overall where it is active, the third market being the UK market. We We have a Singapore Airlines tactical activity come up very, very shortly in the German market. As I mentioned before, the Content and Office Hub will be launched in France and Italy later in April. And then the rest of the activity is all about training. So we have the Aussie Convention, which is a training weekend, come up in Italy in mid-May. And that is in conjunction with our state and territory office partners, as well as some product partners, where we will train Aussie specialist agents as well as some high potential Aussie specialist to be agents. Then we have a Premier Aussie Specialist weekend in late May in the German market, and 2 Aussie Specialist Vermils out of Germany and Italy respectively, one taking place in June and one taking place in April. Thank you very much. Dankeschön, merci, grazie mille for your attention. I've really enjoyed sharing my insights on the continental European markets with you. I will be at ATE for the duration of the show and am more than happy to come and talk to you about the markets in more detail. Please come and find me if you'd like to say good day. And alternatively, if ATE is not the place where I'll meet you, please do not hesitate to call into our Frankfurt office and share your product update with us and pick our brains on what you could be doing in our markets. Thank you very much.